Hello YouTube, W&J's Handy Dad here. Today we are going to rotate and 303 the tires. I like to use a plastic tool to remove these. I know you can technically use a screwdriver. You risk scratching stuff if you do that. But the process is pretty simple. Remove the cover from the two wheels that you're going to flop. Typically you're going to go front to back and back to front. Then you want to crack all of your lug nuts loose, about a turn or two, but again on both wheels. Then jack up the car, use your jack stands to secure the vehicle, so you should have two wheels off the ground at that point. Fully loosen the lug nuts, remove the tire, do whatever you're going to do with the tires, switch them, reinstall them, hand tighten the lug nuts, lower the vehicle, and then torque them. And you want to go in a star pattern on a 5 lug wheel, and I typically torque them about 95 to 100 foot-pounds. The Crown Vic's a 13/16. And no, this is not a torque wrench, this is an expandable wrench. I've had people leave hateful comments that you shouldn't use a torque wrench to loosen, and I don't. And the reason you give them a turn or two on the ground, the rear tire's not that big a deal because you've got a parking brake and a parking pole that'll hold it, but your front tire obviously will just spin sometimes if you're trying to loosen it by hand. If you have a air impact wrench, usually it doesn't matter. You can loosen it off the ground just fine. I usually try to get the tire just, maybe a ½ inch to an inch off the ground, just enough to where it can turn freely. And there you see why, if you don't get them loose enough when they're on the ground, it'll just spin. When you have the tire off the car, it's always a good time to check your rotors, your calipers, your brake pads, make sure everything looks like it's in good shape. You might bleed your brakes while you've got it off of there. I mean, there's lots of things you can do. I've been getting a little bit of a squeak sometimes when I stop, so I'm going to be checking for pads, make sure they're not worn. And if they are, obviously I need to grab a new set. Squeak can come from a lot more than just worn brake pads, obviously. If things weren't lubricated properly when these were installed, if you look on there, there's a lot of rust, so that could be causing the noise as well if it's trying to move around and stuff. So I'll take a good look at them. Also, you have wear indicators on the pads you can check. You usually can see them through one of these gaps. You may have to turn your wheel to see it, or stick your head all the way in there, which obviously I can't do with the camera, or all you're going to see is the back of my head. But basically you're looking for the pad to still show the wear indicators, and I'll post up a picture of what that looks like. The other thing I like to do is check for nails or other damage, make sure the tread, like you see, these are basically brand new tires, so they're in great shape. Also, we'll check in here for any accumulated dirt, grime, road tar, whatever that could be throwing the tire off balance, and I'll clean it thoroughly. Then we're going to clean the tire all around and then soak it with 303, tread and all. Don't do the tread if you're fixing to drive. I'm not going to need to drive this thing for 2 days, so it'll have plenty of time to soak in and not be slippery. Just be careful when you 303 the tread when you first drive. Don't do anything crazy, because you could have a slick spot somewhere on your tire, but I find it to be perfectly safe after a very short distance down the road. And theoretically it protects the rubber on the tire from drying out, splitting, and possibly even other damage. And while I have these off the car, I'm going to try to clean them up, sand them down, whatever I need to do to have them ready to paint. My plan is to rattle can the high heat black on here and then cover them with the activated clear coat. It's October 19th today, and you see how hot it is. Now, I don't normally prime the wheels when I paint them, and I know some of you are probably horrified to hear that, but I haven't had any issues with not priming them. However, in a case like this area here had rust that I had to remove, so I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a rust converting primer. Try to hit some of these other rust areas. Like these, I typically don't worry about sanding because the lug nuts are going to, you know, rough those areas up anyway. I'm trying to hit this little rim here that has the rust on it. But the rust converting primer will hopefully stop the rust from happening so that when I do paint it, the rust won't come back. You know, this is down to bare metal, just about here, almost a whole area. Normally when I'm painting them, there's at least some paint on them. I'm going to do the 303 on this side first, then I'm going to clean this with lacquer thinner before I spray it. So that'll solve two issues. One, the 303 will keep any paint or primer from sticking to the tire rubber. And the lacquer thinner will clean the 303 off of the wheel portion. So you see I've done the tread, the outside of the tire, and also the inside of the tire. And I'm just going to let that soak in. I'm not going to wipe that off. So as often happens when I'm doing these projects, I've decided to go ahead and paint it today because it's over 80 degrees today. It's middle of October. It's always possible to have hot days like this, you know, before spring, but you never know. So I'm going to go ahead and spray the black on here. I'm not going to be able to spray the clear until I get to the shop. But thankfully putting the clear on top of the black shouldn't be an issue at all. In fact, I could probably do that on the vehicle. I'm going to go ahead and try this paint. I really wanted to use the high heat paint, but that's at the shop, of course. So, got to improvise. We'll see how well this works. The nice thing is if this fails, I can always put the high heat on it at a later time. But if this works, then I'm done. So we'll let that primer dry, and then I'm not going to mask anything. I'm just going to spray. You saw my video before. I've actually painted the tires before, and it's perfectly fine. It lasts, you know, at least a month. Looks like you've got a really good tire shine product. And so I got the 303 on here. Paint's not going to stick to the tire. It will stick to the wheel where we've cleaned it, but it'll come right off the tire for us. So I'm not worried about masking. I'm just going to spray. Probably hit it with a real light coat and then 2 progressively thicker coats, and do the same thing for the other tires. In the rear, they're visible from there, and again, appears that I still have some life in these pads. So I'm guessing that my squeaking is actually caused by these looking kind of rusty. I'm betting when they last changed these out, they just didn't grease anything up. They probably don't care about noises.